Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of From Page to Stage. I'm your host, Wendy Corner, and this podcast is for you if you are an entrepreneur. Yes, page and stage come together in entrepreneurship. You may be thinking, hey, what? Page, stage? What's that got to do with me? Well, as an entrepreneur, you may have a contributory book out. You may have a solo book out. You may have a regular blog. If you're an entrepreneur, I bet you've got socials out, haven't you? Well, what's that if it's not published work? Tick that box. What about the speaking thing? A lot of people come to me and go, oh, I'm shy, I don't want to do the public speaking thing. That's not me at all. And I go, can you have a one-on-one conversation with somebody? Yes. Then you can do a podcast. And yes, that is a stage. Anytime you open your mouth with intention and speak to somebody, stage. So I want to blow your mind when it comes to those parameters that you put around page and stage. Okay, having done that, welcome. Now, I have got the joy and pleasure of introducing you to the lovely Oli Cohen, sitting in London.
Yes, West London.
West London, yeah. I was just checking that I knew it was the UK, but we're in London. Now, Oli and I have known each other for about that much. We've had a couple of conversations. He knows himself a lot better than I do. So, Oli, I'm going to ask you to share with us about who you are and how you got to where you are today.
Okay, well, that's one of those questions I always answer differently. I'm not quite sure where I'm going to go with it,
Great.
But yeah, because we're many things, aren't we? As a career, I am a cinematographer. I wasn't always a cinematographer. These days, I'm a cinematographer, but I'm also a photographer, and I'm also a filmmaker, and I run an initiative or a project called Life Stories. It's a business where we turn people's lives into documentaries. So it's about creating a legacy. But that's just a part of it, really. It's about connecting the generations. It's about opening people's perspectives a little bit, so they're encouraging appreciation and curiosity, particularly from the younger generation to the older generation. So it's all of those things. And as I've been delving more and more into it, I realize there's so much to say on this topic, which is kind of how we ended up talking to each other in the first place.
Yeah, but isn't it lovely the idea that there seems to be almost a divide between generations these days, particularly over tech, because you've got youngsters who've grown up with screens, and those of us who have come to screens later in life, or rather, screens have come to us later in life, and it's a bit of a joke, but if you want to answer any tech questions, ask a 5-year-old. They will put you right. But it's having common ground and also showing the youngsters life was different when we were your age. How about we explore that as well? And they go, no screens? No. And some of the things I've shared along the road with little people, they've gone, oh, it's beyond their comprehension. So what you're doing is really phenomenal. So yeah, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, on the subject of technology and screens, it's an interesting one, isn't it? Because we on the one hand, this technology has to a certain extent delivered on the promise of enabling this wonderful communication and connection. So you're in Mexico, I'm in London, we're speaking in real time, and it's absolutely mind-blowing. It's to the extent we take it, but it's not mind-blowing anymore because we just take it for granted. But when you think about it, it's like, what? And this is, I was speaking to my my mum's husband, a new husband, at Christmas. When he grew up, they didn't have electricity. He used to have a candle when he went to bed at night, and that is not that long ago, really. But now it's like talking to each other over Zoom. It is, and we have these amazing gadgets in our pockets, our phones, and it's supposed to make us more connected. Social media is supposed to make us more connected, but the irony is that it actually doesn't seem to have done that, really, and we're living in this pandemic of loneliness, and people are feeling really isolated, and their attention spans of, I mean, I'm not really qualified to talk about it too much, but this is how I kind of really, this is my understanding of it. Attention spans have gone down so much that people, when people meet up in the real world over coffee or we go out for dinner, so many people have their mobile phones on the table, and it's a constant threat. And apparently, there's data shows that just having your phone on the table can increase the anxiety of the person speaking, because because we all know there's more interesting stuff in that phone than you can deliver when you're trying to tell your story. So, it's one of those double-edged swords things, and I really encourage people to, and I really don't want to be preachy about it, but I really encourage people to put their phones away. I mean, I'm guilty of this myself, but put your phones away when you meet up with people, and don't even have it on the table.
Yeah, yeah. Well, when golly, I mean, this is a good few years ago now, when mobile phones were really starting to come to the fore.
Mm.
We, as a staff team, my background is in speech pathology, audience, if you're not familiar with that. And as a staff team, we went out one night. Now, predominantly women, let's face it, most speech therapists are. It's getting better in terms of the equality of gender. But there were 10 of us around the table. And the first thing we did was identify, has anybody got a sick child at home? Okay, you're allowed to keep your phone on. Everybody else, phones in your bags, on silent. And if anybody's rings or if anybody goes looking at it, you pick up the tab for everyone.
Oh, wow. That's very
Now
strict.
that it was very strict,
Yeah.
but it was very effective. Everybody
Yeah.
looked at them. As I said, we were clear from the start that if anybody actually had a reason, they got a sick child at home, babysitter was looking after them, whatever, then yes, they were allowed to have their phone on mute, but it could vibrate.
So
But it
this
was
is,
screen down.
just to pick you up on what you said, this is a group of speech pathologists who are all women. What just can you explain what speech pathology actually is? Because that's not a word that would typically use.
Right. In the UK, speech therapist.
Okay.
Okay.
And the
So
rest
we
of the
were,
world, something else.
the rest of the world tends to call them speech pathologists.
Okay.
Because this is a global podcast, I'm referring
Right.
to it as the more common version. But yes, I mean, when I qualified, I was a speech therapist, and then before I left, I was a speech and language therapist. So the UK has speech and language therapists.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah. Sorry for making an
No.
assumption. Thank you for picking me up on that. So yes, you can imagine the noise level of 10 women together was quite fun, and the rest of the restaurant were deafened by our chit chat. But
Yeah.
that
So you
was
get it. So you get it though. It's good to put the phone away. It's they're making
absolutely,
film.
yeah. And when I was training in Australia, if anybody's phone went off, the comment was, that's a case. The unwritten rule was if your phone went off during training, whosever phone it was would buy a case of beer, basically shout everybody a drink after work.
Okay.
So again, the motivation was there to make sure that no, it's off. Not even on silent, it's off.
Yes, that sounds a bit like being on a film set.
It
You're not
must be,
allowed.
yes.
You're not allowed to have your phone go off. Yeah, and I've heard stories of how some directors don't allow anybody to look at their phone on a film set. But the thing is, the phone is a multi-tool now. We use it for so many things. As a cinematographer, I use it all the time to see what the sun's doing, to control lights. I'm using my phone right now to control the two lights. So we've become sort of reliant on them.
Almost surgically attached.
Mm.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes. No, there was, I do an awful lot of people watching in airport lounges and
Nice.
sort of general,
People watching.
people watching is fascinating. But
Yeah.
you're now seeing what I'm seeing in the food court areas, families, mum, dad, and littlies, some as young as 3, maybe even less than, all 4 of them on screens. No
Yeah.
interaction at all. And I'm looking
Oh,
at this from a
boundaries.
language perspective and going,
You're right.
Um,
Something doesn't seem right about it.
yeah.
Thinking about people watching, that's a common term, right? When we all know what it
Mhm.
is. A word that isn't, I've only just thought of this, that isn't used is like people listening. And, because sometimes, and this is what's particularly interesting to me um, about curiosity, about listening, about having better conversations. I don't just watch people, I listen in. I mean, often I'm, listening to a podcast myself, but sometimes it's fascinating. If I'm in a restaurant and I'm on my own, which I quite like to do actually, don't have the headphones in,
Mhm.
listen to what's going on around you, and I find it fascinating, sort of tuning in to the dynamic within that group. And it really occurs to me that so many people are not very good at having conversations. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is actually um, trying to look at things from other people's points of view, trying to have a I don't know, what do you call it, like a dance almost, where
Mhm.
you're interacting with each other,
Yeah.
and you're properly listening, as opposed to just waiting for it's your turn to speak and then you tell your thing, but you
Yes.
weren't actually listening to what that person just said. You didn't follow on from what that person said. And that
Yeah.
person said what they just said was really interesting, or what was all, maybe it wasn't that interesting, but what was I consider interesting and important is this person had the need to share, and they want, because
Yes.
that's what we need. We need to share. We need to be understood. We need to be seen, and that's to
Mm.
a large extent why we meet up with each other. But then
Mm.
people are interacting, but they're not actually properly listening or seeing that person. So you can sometimes you can go away from meeting up with somebody, and you kind of actually feel worse than you did before you met up with them. And that's like, why is that the case, and it's so much about, I think, whether how skilled the people are in that group of actually having a proper conversation, which isn't like I was trying to say, it's an exchange. It's not just a rant. I know I might sound like I'm ranting now, but we've got to be aware you don't want to rant too much.
But you're right. There's the art of listening. I tend to put listening in two different categories. There's listening to respond,
Okay.
and there's listening to understand.
Right.
Because the listening to respond is you've said something, you said one word in your conversation that's pinged off something in my head. I've missed the rest of your chat because I've been
Ah,
in my own head following my own train of thought. So I've got something I can respond with to that one
right.
word.
Yes.
And you may have carried on a completely different trajectory from the conversation, but I'm still stuck on this one word. So what I then come up with, where did you get that from? So that's the listening to respond. And then
Mm,
there's the listening to understand, which leaves my train of thought out of it. And I'm sitting
mm,
here, okay, tell me more. Why is that important to you? And
right.
invite further interaction.
Mm,
And that's when you get somebody going, oh, no, you really are listening to me, aren't you? You really are
yeah.
engaged. You really are interested.
Right.
Somebody once described it as me listening with my eyes and my heart. Right.
Nice.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that. It feels like there are other types of listening as well, where you're not actually listening, you're just sort of hearing and you're somewhat listening, but it's just sort of flowing off you like a water off a duck's back, and you don't actually
Mm-hmm.
care. So it's not
Mm.
even listening to respond, and it's not listening to understand, it's just kind of hearing, you know. You
Yes.
might be able to repeat back of some of the words that person said, but you're not
Yes.
actually engaged and you don't care, you're
Yeah.
not really curious.
Yes.
That I would say is most common.
Yes. True. True. And I mean, you got the classic example there of an interaction between a fella and a woman, and she's saying, "You're not listening to a word I'm saying," and he can give you the last three words she said, and he says,
Mm,
"See," and
mm,
that's where I go. You do realise there's a memory, a short-term memory lag there so that he can repeat back the last three words, but what was said beforehand, no, that didn't remember at all. But again, that's also a case of attention, because
Right.
I've spoken to a lot of couples like this where that's been the complaint. He doesn't listen. And I said, have you actually got his attention before you started talking?
Mm.
What do you mean? I said, well, fellas, neurotypically, tend to be single channel attention.
Okay.
I'm focused on something, particularly if there's a game on the TV and they're watching the match, and wifey comes in and starts talking. He's busy watching the game. Unless you've one, called his name, and two, waited for a response,
Right.
then you
Yeah.
start speaking.
Okay. That's interesting. So men are more what just following on from what you're saying, men
Compartmentalized. They
compound
tend to compartmentalize. They tend to be focused on
compartmentalized,
something.
whereas women can do have multiple compartments.
Yeah. The reason being, from a neurological perspective, is women have a bigger corpus callosum, which is the central
Okay.
section of the brain that enables wiring to go from either side of the hemispheres. So there's more
Okay.
connections going on.
And
Men
are we
tend to
talking
have,
about are we
well,
and we're talking about a different thing from multitasking here, right?
yes, we are.
Mm.
Yes, that because the connections between the hemispheres are greater in women than they are in men.
Yeah.
That's why men can be more focused.
Oh.
That's why women can see the connections in different things. Because you'll sometimes talk to a woman and
Mm.
she says, "Oh, but that reminds me of such and such," and you go, "How?" It doesn't seem logical to a man. Why can't a woman be more like a man? To quote Pygmalion. But the connections there, our brains literally are wired differently.
Right.
And if you want to
Fascinating.
get technical, that comes down to a testosterone injection at whichever week it is in gestation. But that's another matter entirely.
Okay.
It doesn't matter how you wish to identify, your brain is actually wired in a certain direction.
Right.
So,
Fascinating.
yeah,
And you
there
know
we go.
about
I
all
was
you
not
know
expecting to go down that road.
but you know about all this because that seems different from speech therapy, or is it not?
Well, yes, yes and no. I mean, um, we had lectures in obstetrics, we had lectures in embryology, because different parts of the brain, different parts of the oral structures come together at different parts during gestation. And
Okay.
if there's an interruption, we can see things like cleft lip, cleft palate,
Oh, really?
um, palatal fistulas, all sorts of structural things. And if you work with people with disabilities, having an
Mm.
idea of where in gestation things got interrupted, or at birth when there's anoxia, that there's been a birth problem, then you can
Mm.
anticipate that there could be XYZ problems in
Okay.
brain development, in physiological development. So, yeah, there's an awful lot to speech pathology, speech therapy. It's
Right.
more than dotting your I's and crossing your T's and that.
Yeah, yeah.
that.
Okay, thanks for saying that. By the way, I've done a lot of work over the years. I still do with Operation Smile. I've filmed with them all around the world. The organization based American, based in West Virginia, or Virginia Beach, or I get it confused. I don't know that part of America, but they're based in Virginia Beach, but they work all around the world. So I've worked with them in Madagascar and in Africa and many other places. And so I'm working with speech therapists. I just didn't just don't
Could you
know
just
about it.
explain to the audience what SMILE is?
Or what Operation Smile is. So Operation
Yes.
Smile, I mean, they've got a fascinating history, but what they are, my understanding of what they are, they're an international NGO, and they collaborate with the local medics, as well as bringing in the world-class medics from more affluent countries, so typically America or Europe and other places. And they bring in surgeons, they bring in anaesthetists, so they bring in and nurses, all loads of people who are volunteering their time, at the same time as volunteering their time, they're kind of learning their sort of, from world-class people in their field, and they're also training up the local medics. But what they're doing, well, the problem they're solving is people with cleft lips and cleft palates who need to have life transforming surgery.
Yes.
They enable this to happen, totally free of charge to the patient. And it's just an absolutely extraordinary work. And from
Yes.
my perspective as a filmmaker documenting it, it's a real privilege to see this. I get a lot of uh, pleasure's not quite the right word, but I get a lot out of seeing other people do extraordinary acts of kindness towards others, and that's the kind of um, work that I particularly like being involved in, because there's so many horrible things going on in the world all the time, and it's really disturbing, isn't it? But there's
Yeah.
also absolutely wonderful things. There's so much progression. There's so much kindness that happens all the time, and for some reason, well, I think I know why, but we tend not to talk about those things. We always tend to talk about the things that are the things to be, to for us to be worried about, for us to go, oh dear, there's this whole oh
Hmm.
dearism thing, and we feel
Hmm.
really helpless, and we feel overwhelmed by the complexity and the mess of what's going on in the world all the time. And so we kind of feel helpless, and then that can lead to further anxiety and mental unhealth, or whatever you want to call it.
Yes.
But there's a way
Yeah.
of I think, and what I try to do is to sort of choose to dial into appreciation, and observing acts of kindness. And yeah, sorry, I've gone on a big rant again. But Operation Smile, as far as I'm
Absolutely.
concerned, is a great example of this, and it's
And
international.
yes, exactly. And as you say, it brings together people from different walks, different
Mm.
cultures, different socioeconomic levels.
Yeah, yeah,
Audience, if you're not familiar what we're talking about in terms of cleft lip, when the face comes together, there can be an interrupt where the facial features don't actually meet, because when the baby is being formed in the womb, each side comes together. Each side is created separately, and they come together, and it's that's joining up. If the joining up is interrupted, you can either get a cleft lip from here to here, here to here, in the middle, and you then get also a cleft palate, so that the palate doesn't actually meet up. If that's the case, there are feeding problems. So there are feeding problems with the lip as well, which means that babies traditionally, if they're in quotes third world countries, do not survive, because the child cannot latch onto the breast, can't drink, because you haven't got you can't create a vacuum in the mouth to draw the fluid in. So there are very big ramifications. If usually it's a death sentence for a baby if in a third world country, but now mercifully it's not.
mm.
Um, that's yes, that is something else that speech therapists get involved with, feeding. So that's another tale entirely.
Yeah. I'm
Oh,
interested in that. The backstory of Operation Smile is fascinating to me as well. Perhaps I should, now I've mentioned it, should just
you
say what it
do.
is very briefly. So my understanding is that I'm just repeating what I've been told. How the stories get distorted through word of mouth.
Mhm.
But my understanding, and I should look into this, is that after the Vietnam War, there were loads of American prisoners of war who were kept in Vietnam, and they weren't being released. And then
Mhm.
along came this American surgeon who offered to, I think he was doing it off his own back. It's a bit of a hero story. Who offered to do all this free um, uh, surgery with people with cleft lips and cleft palates, to the people of Vietnam, and he operated on
Mhm.
loads of people. And as a consequence of that act, all these prisoners of war were released, which I think is just a cute story, isn't it? It's lovely.
Well, if it is, it's wonderful. Because I was wondering
Mm.
whether that also came out. I don't know whether you would have remembered it. There was a documentary, The Child David. There was a, he was a British surgeon. I think he was living in the States, and he'd been to Peru. I think it was Peru, and this child had a double cleft. So he got, and basically he'd also then had a particular illness which had eaten away his face. And so he was basically left with a hole here. And he used to stuck up against the base of his brain. And it was, I mean, the poor child was so disfigured. And the surgeon came and sort of basically pulled him back. I'm sure it was the US. Took him back to the US, though the surgeon himself was British, and did amazing surgery. And in the end, they adopted him. They were allowed to adopt him. But it documents so many of the surgeries that he went through. This was pioneering surgery that the surgeon was actually almost practicing on this child, but he did it out of tremendous compassion for this child. I'm sure it's called the boy David. But I mean, we're talking about the late 70s. So I mean, the surgical techniques were very advanced for the day, but it was such a beautiful story. Now, I watched it on the BBC. I think it was a BBC documentary, but it's worth checking out. I'm sure it was called The Boy David.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. Thank you.
Okay, well, that was a lovely conversation. This is what I love about these podcasts, is we go down wonderful little rabbit holes.
Yes.
But Oli, you're in the process of writing a book, aren't you?
The beginnings of one, yes.
Yeah.
Well, it's part of the reason for writing it is because I have a lot of I think a lot about things. I reflect a lot about things, and I ask a lot of questions, and I gather stuff, and I have decades worth of experience now as a filmmaker. So I've observed so many conversations and interviews that have happened, and with life stories, I've set up this documentary, this legacy documentary company, documenting people's lives, and and I think I've got quite a lot to say when it comes to how to have better conversations, how to be curious, how to listen better, how to enable people to open up and feel comfortable, and to feel heard and to be appreciated, and to sort of dial into your own intuition, that so that you can sense to what extent it's okay to ask a follow-on question, or when it's best to not say anything at all, and to give this person the space. And I think it's so empowering for both people involved, to have conversations where you're leaning more into what I consider, at least, to be more interesting conversations, where you're trying to look at things from their point of view, to talking about things that are more fundamentally human, rather than, I don't know, just talking about property prices, or talking about, I don't know, the weather, or where you're going to go on holiday. I mean, it's fine. I mean, so small talk serves a purpose, but I think we need more than that. And what do we need? We need all these things about being heard and appreciated, but we also need to be connected, and we need to and so much of it comes down to having decent conversations, and how to listen better. And it's all about, I would say, well, to a large extent, it's about curiosity, and trying to look at things from other people's points of view, and dialing up the whole empathy thing, which, as a filmmaker, good. What I watch movies all the time, and I want, from the cinema experience, I want to sort of have like an out of body experience, and be so absorbed in the story, where you're kind of feeling it, where you're really your suspension of disbelief is completely suspended, and you're really feeling it for those characters. And that's a wonderful thing that I think that we need, because I think on the fundamental, we know that we aren't just our, I mean, I'm out of my depth with talking about this, but we're not just our physical body and we're not just our brain. We are connected to each other, and there's a mystery in that which I like. But anyway, I've got all these thoughts about it, and I've been journaling, for many years now, and have a background in philosophy and sociology and psychology, and decades worth of experience as a filmmaker, and I'm doing this whole life stories thing, which is so I've got all of these thoughts, and they're a mess. It's a sort of chaotic thoughts that I've got. So I'm just trying to organize them, and create a bit of structure to sort of share what I've learned and from other people, but also from my own life experience, to get a bit of order within the chaos of all of these things,
Yeah.
and hopefully create something that can benefit people, as opposed to just benefiting myself of creating, a bit of order out of the chaos in my own head.
Yeah. Well, I mean, by you creating the order out of your own chaos, you
Mm,
can reflect and share with other people how potentially their chaos can be organized
maybe,
as
yes,
well as this wonderful reflection on human connection and conversation. In terms of organizing your thoughts,
yes.
are you wedded to a computer? Are you more an old school paper and pen?
More computer, yeah.
More computer.
I write down stuff on my computer. I write down stuff on my phone. I dictate. I have
Mm-hmm.
lots of conversations with ChatGPT.
Oh, yes, you do.
Yeah,
The reason
yeah.
I'm asking this is because I find these things incredibly useful.
Yes.
Sticky notes. When
Mm,
I have, and I'm literally about to start this with my next book, I've got
mm,
all these ideas running around, and I put one idea onto a sticky note.
mm-hmm.
And as the ideas come up, I have a wall behind me with lots of sticky notes. As the ideas come up, I just put them on these sticky notes, and then gradually you can see, oh, actually, well, that point goes along with that one. And you can physically
Right.
start to create a structure.
Okay.
And
Maybe
then
I
you can
should look
decide,
into that. Yeah.
well, I mean,
If they're
it's old
connected.
school. It's old
It
school, but
is.
I know that as a visual person, clearly, as a cinematographer, photographer, you're
Mm,
very into the visuals. I mean, mind mapping might work for you as well.
yes.
But this sort of thing, in terms of you're not trying to organize it to start with, you're just simply getting ideas on a sticky note. But because you've only got
Mm.
one per thing, you can, that goes along with that. And actually
I've
physically
heard
put them
about
underneath each
people
other.
writing books like that and literally having
Yeah.
their floor all covered in paper and move it around. You move stuff around so it makes a bit more
Yes.
shape, or makes more sense. And in a lot of those uh, quite dramatic whodunit movies, you get this sort of detective who's to put all these things, the cops, they put these things on the walls, don't they? And then you get the crazy person whose house is full of all of this stuff all over the place. I'm not like that because I like tidiness. I like design. I like light and shape and things to be all neat. And yeah, and when things are tidy and
Uh-huh.
ordered, then I notice. I don't understand this, but I notice my stress levels go down, and then I feel
Yeah.
more creative. So that's
Yes.
why I'm not a huge fan of putting sticky notes everywhere. I just
Yeah.
don't find that
That's fine.
attractive.
No. Well, it's a suggestion, and it's
Yeah.
something that I find useful. But I mean, you can do the equivalent sticky notes on your computer,
Yes.
and
Yeah,
then
I should try that.
you can start moving them around. That
Yeah.
that for me is the joy of it because you're not trying to create order out of chaos immediately.
Or
You're
it's just too
simply
much in your head
exactly,
to kind of wrap your head
exactly.
around the whole thing. Yes.
So as a visual person, if you've just got all these mishmash of ideas on your screen under different sticky notes, you can physically, well, mouse them across in different directions because it then means that you can see if there's a flow, you can
Yes.
see if there are things that go together.
Right.
Um, which of these does not belong to each other, sort of Sesame style, and you can work it out from there. I find that is useful for me. I'm offering it as a suggestion. It's not just chuck it
Okay. Take it or leave it. Yeah. Yeah, because we were talking earlier about how um, individuals perceive. This might seem a bit of a tangent from what we've just been talking about, but now, but we were talking before we started recording this. We went into a little bit of this topic of how not only is the past remembered differently by different people, but the present is perceived differently by different people, and I've been thinking about that quite a bit, and
Mm,
in the importance of storytelling
mm,
and how and what is the truth and so I've got this that's like a whole topic in itself, but I'm like, how does that
mm.
fit into this book, um so
Well, maybe
even
it doesn't.
well
Maybe
no
it
but
doesn't. Maybe that's another volume.
right, okay. Okay. But in my mind it does because a lot of the time it seems to me families don't show enough curiosity into um they don't ask questions to the elder generation because they think they already know the answer. And this isn't just relevant to family legacies. It's
Mm,
in all it's often, I think, the case that people choose not to answer questions because A, they think the answer's obvious,
yeah,
or they already know it, or they don't want to look stupid. And I lived
yeah,
in America for a few years and I actually studied there for a bit. And I was just astonished how often people didn't want to ask the questions because they didn't want to be perceived by their peers as not being up to the level, and I was
yes,
going in as an older student, and I was like, well, sod it. I don't
yeah,
care. I'm just going to ask because I think I might know the answer, but how I
yeah,
would answer the question is going to be different from the next person. So often when you ask a question, it's not actually to get the answer or to get a sort of a fundamental answer. It's actually what you're doing is trying to you're trying to understand and learn how that other person perceives the thing, which is, I think, more interesting. You know,
in
it
a
says
good
more.
teacher,
It says
or
more about the person. The answer
mm,
says more about the person than the actual truth, and I think that's relevant to what I want to write a book about, but I don't know how to put it in.
yes,
Sorry.
yeah. No. I think you're right. The reason I'm saying maybe it's a separate topic, you could
Right.
possibly even introduce it in that context and then have another volume. I'm mentioning this because the book that I started to write,
Mm.
I was running a writing group, and
Mm.
I was joining in with my own work as well. And the feedback I got was there's too much information for one book. Split it
Ah.
up, do a
Oh.
series,
Mm.
which is why My Life with 20 Kilos is not one volume. We've started off with hoarder to hand luggage. We've
Mm-hmm.
also done I Get By with a Lot of Help from My Friends, which is
Right.
book one and book five in the series, and the three in between are going to be coming out partly this year and maybe even into next year, because there was just too much to go in one volume. As you
Right.
mentioned earlier, we have a shorter attention span. The too long didn't read is a very real
That's
thing.
interesting.
So
Okay.
I would caution you to put in
Too
everything in
much.
one volume.
Yeah, you're right. That's a really good point, and I haven't thought enough um, about these things. I suppose because I've never written a book. I mean, actually, I have written a chapter or a book, or rather, I was interviewed for a book before. So
Mm,
apart from that, and a few some magazines and stuff where that I've been in,
yeah,
I have never actually written a book from start to finish. So right now I'm at a stage where it seems very daunting because there's a lot of there's a lot of information in one book, and uh,
yeah.
and it's easy to think, how am I going to have enough to say to make it an interesting book? But you're suggesting the opposite of that.
I would by all means do kind of like an overview of the different topics that you want to include so that
Mm,
it's coherent and also gives the taster of this is what I want to explore in another volume.
right. So what do you do when it comes to getting help, with someone else reading it and giving feedback and editing it? Do you
Well,
have
I
like
would
a
highly recommend that
format?
you do have an editor,
Right.
because there are people who can look at it. There are different levels of editing. There's the developmental editor, which looks at
Mm-hmm.
it and goes, "You're kind of missing the flow here. How about if
Mm-hmm.
this bit goes around there?" And they will help you form the actual book.
Mm.
So those are what we call developmental editors. There are editors who like editing kind of proofreading, will read it and go, well, that error, there's a grammatical error there, there's a grammatical error there. They might suggest a bit more rephrasing it in terms of the flow, but they won't necessarily say, that bit could do with going over here, and let's shift stuff around. So that would be not an ordinary, that would be a specific editor. You then have the proofreader who is simply looking for those errors.
Mm.
So those are the three different levels. I would highly also recommend that you talk to friends, get them to read the
Right.
manuscript.
Yes.
If they're people that you trust, excuse me, can give you honest, accurate feedback.
Mm-hmm.
A mutual friend of ours read through my first manuscript, and the comment was, she knew my background was in speech pathology. She said, "It's reading like your clinical notes.
Mm.
We need more of you. We need more emotion in there."
Yeah.
Which is why it took me so long to write it, because I was invited to unpack the emotions that I had just boxed away because I didn't want to deal with them.
Mm.
So, multiple boxes of tissues later, the book was born, and it was an international bestseller. So,
Amazing.
yes, have a few people, a few trusted people that you can get to beta read it and make those suggestions.
Okay.
If you can get somebody who would be your target reader as well, so much the better, because
I
you
haven't
then
even
get
thought about
feedback from
that.
the people it's aimed at.
Right. Yeah, I should think about who the target reader is.
Oh, yes,
Mm.
yes. And what's your motivation for putting it out in the first place?
Yeah.
If it's purely for you, that's one thing. If you're writing for a particular audience, you're writing to share your wisdom. That's
Mm.
another matter entirely.
Yeah, because if you're just doing it for yourself, then why bother getting it printed? You just keep it, as a PDF. So there has to be, you have to be writing it with, the hope that someone's going to read it. Um, what was your process? Incentivized you to write your first book?
Well, I left Perth on the. Well, I arrived in Malaysia on the 1st of March 2024, having lived in Australia for 10 years, having come from a family of hoarders, married into a family of hoarders, lost father-in-law, mother-in-law, brother-in-law, and husband in the space of 10 years. So all of their stuff ended up at what was then my house. Then I was migrating. So I went from 3 houses to 30 boxes. That was the first purge. The problem was, whilst I got rid of a load of physical stuff, I hadn't got rid of the mental crap and the
Right.
idea of hoarding. So 10 years on, when I felt the nudge to move on from Perth, things were not working in terms of my business.
Mm.
It was 30 boxes and 10 years worth of accumulation.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the exploration of the letting go of the physical stuff. My whole series is called Letting Go, Living Lighter. So
Nice.
it's that was the first book about particularly the physical stuff. The one that is coming out next will be looking at the internal scripts, as I call them. What are those stories we tell ourselves and
Right.
how those are impacting on our daily lives? Generally, they were established in moments of crisis. They were survival
Okay.
ones. And some of them, I mean, my core one comes back from when I was 2. And I'm still exploring the
Your
excuse me,
first
the
crisis.
tentacles of
Right.
that decision that I made when I was 2 from a survival perspective. So
Oh,
yeah, that's what
that's
that one's coming
interesting.
up.
I'm curious what that is, but maybe you don't want to talk about it. Um, but that's what you've experienced. This
Mm.
a lot of loss, a lot of changes, family
Mm-hmm.
stuff, a lot of material possessions, getting rid of them.
Yeah.
So that's a lot, which is an interesting topic for a book.
Mm.
Um, but but what? a lot of people deal with challenges in their life. We all do, I would say,
Mm.
but you don't, but decide not to write a book about it. Why did you think a book is the right thing, what to write about? Was your incentive, I've just gone through something, and I want to share this with the world so that other people can know about it, or can somehow benefit from it, or or were
Yes.
you mostly writing it for yourself, or
No. It was, and the way it's written is there are self-reflective questions all the way through.
oh,
So there
so
are
like a
questions that
manual.
I pose during the actual chapters, and then at the end of each chapter there are 3 or 4 journal this type things. So
Mm,
it's not a book that you read cover to cover without some contemplation in the middle.
right.
And the feedback I've had from people are going, ooh, oh, yes, I
Ah,
need to do something. So an awful lot of the people who picked it up to start with were F and F, basically friends and family. But because I've got contacts across the world,
mm,
it has had a very big reach. And when I was in Singapore, I was showing it to somebody, and she said, "Have you got any plans to translate this into Mandarin? Because hoarding is a big problem in Singapore.
is it?
In fact, there have been fatalities from people who've had so much stuff in their flat that when their flat or apartment, bearing in mind this is all audience, they haven't got out in time because there's been a fire. They
Oh
haven't
no.
managed to get out.
Oh, it's
Um,
horrible.
so that was a bit of a shock. I went, yeah, well, that's pathological hoarding. That requires psychiatric input, not from me. But
Mm,
the point that this lady was making was you're asking questions that are at the start of a reflection that could end up in saving somebody's life. And I go,
mm,
wow, I hadn't thought of that. So you don't know if you're putting out a book to help other people, and the questions that we've been talking about from your perspective in terms of the legacy,
mm.
that can have major impact on intergenerational connection.
Yeah.
So absolutely, Ollie, go to it, my friend.
What, writing a book, you mean, or carry
Yeah,
on doing the legacy thing?
or
Yes.
both, both.
Right. Yeah. I kind of feel that I mean, I could write the book now, but I also I want life stories to get going a lot more, so
Yeah.
that I've got more individual examples to talk about,
Mm-hmm.
But having said that, I have got storytelling examples throughout my whole career
Yes.
and just my general life experience. Um, but yes,
Well, they'll
I
cross
will
pollinate
carry on.
each other
Yeah.
because people will pick up the book and go, "Oh, is that what he's up? Oh, golly, this is. I'm really enjoying this. What else is he up to? Ah, let's
Mm,
go look at the film working."
yeah.
And quite the other way as well. So they
Yeah.
go hand in hand.
Right. I definitely want in the book, I definitely want to talk about family stories
Yeah.
and helping people leave a legacy and to help people create life stories themselves of their
Yes.
loved ones. And it doesn't, except the way I do it, well, the way we do it through life stories is we use high-end cinema cameras. It's multiple cameras, and it's lit and shot really nicely with professional audio, and then it's intercut with nice photographs and archive footage and music and graphics. So it becomes a more engaging, watchable thing.
Yeah.
But anybody can create anyone can start recording their loved ones just with their mobile phones, just using the voice memos app, and just get the
Yes.
phone close and then just start asking just asking the right questions and listening, and give that person the opportunity to speak. So I want to talk about that a lot, and I
Yeah.
think that can really help people.
Well, you're inviting people to make the start of it, as you say. Your work is the high end stuff, but that
Mm,
intergenerational. I mean, you were saying about your mother's husband and that stuff. I remember
mm,
having a conversation with my father. He passed at 95, 4 years ago now, and he was the Zoom thing. He had we were on a family Zoom call, and there was him in the UK in one part. There was my brother and sister-in-law in another part of the UK. There was my
mm,
niece in Italy, and there was me in Australia. And Dad's going, how can I see my family all around the world in one place? Well, Dad, you don't need to worry about how it happens. Just enjoy the fact that you can.
Yeah.
And on a quiet moment I had with him, I said, because he was born in 1926, I said,
Wow.
Dad, when you were a child and you looked up in the night sky, did you ever have any notion that there would be a man standing on the moon? And he went,
Nice.
no, I didn't. So that
Yeah.
was an invitation for him to reflect on all the changes that he had seen through his 95 years.
Mm.
And that's when he really we went into overdrive in reflection time. But it was
Yeah.
just simply something like that as a question. And that's
Yeah.
what you're talking about, isn't it? Getting people to say, and I worked with Aboriginal ladies in Australia, bringing their stories into schools
Oh,
about
great.
how some of them were still migrant and they had tents, and what they put on the floor was not, there was Hessian sacks over the top of eucalyptus leaves, so that every time you walked, you got the aroma coming up, and
Haven't
you
heard
also
that.
got the the sort of healing properties, because if you're breathing in eucalyptus all the time, it's amazing how much you don't go down with respiratory issues.
Okay.
And these children were going, you lived in a tent?
Hmm.
Yes. How old are you? I'm in my 60s.
Mm.
Really? Yes.
Yeah.
We didn't have screens. Can you imagine life without Wi Fi? And these kids were just going, it was so far out of their experience, but they were goggle
Mm.
eyed trying to
Yeah.
get their head around what it looked like, because they were imagining sort of luxury glamping tents.
Mm.
No, these were canvas tents with Hessian sacks on the floor.
Yeah.
And they were just
It's
going, it was
astonishing,
way
isn't it?
beyond their experience and expectation. But that's
Mm.
the sort of connection that you're talking about, isn't it?
Yeah, and mind shift, if because we take so many things for granted, and it's so easy. You get it something for a bit, and it's a novelty, whatever it is, like these things. Now the idea of not having these things, I can't. It's hard for me to imagine it because I put them in and I go for a walk. But that's
Yeah,
a new bit of tech that no one had AirPods 10 years ago,
no,
um, and so I think if you actually show curiosity and listen to the older generations, realize how little they had, there is the hope at least that it will make you appreciate the things that you have now. We have such luxuries, don't
yes,
we? And yet
we do.
we always we have it's so the default is to sort of have this sort of scarcity mindset and to feel like we haven't got enough, things aren't good enough,
Yep,
things and to sort of think things were better in the past. It's like, well, for the most of history, they weren't.
yep,
Maybe there was a tiny little time when things were really good back in whatever, pick your year, 2012. I think in the UK, that was probably our peak civilization. But for most of history, things have been a lot harder. Can you imagine life without radiators in the UK? And I know you live in a warm country at the moment, but just these basic things that
yep.
we enjoy, but we just take them for granted. And I think it's good to remind yourself of how fortunate we are to have all of these luxuries.
I think,
Mm.
forgive me as we're winding up on this one, Ollie, I think that those
Mm.
are wonderful words of wisdom to be very much appreciative of what we have and not take things for granted. I do a general gratitude practice,
Great.
and I try and find something new every day to be grateful for. And
Hmm.
one of the more uncommon ones that I came up with was perforations. And I was sharing this with somebody, and they went, "Perforations?" I said, "Well," as I'm dipping my tea bag, I said, "Well, for one thing, I mean, Tetley used to say, let the flavour flood out from the perforations." But it was also then I realised toilet paper,
Mm.
kitchen paper,
Yeah,
all these things that we have perforations in that we don't
you don't
tend
think about
to.
that. Yes.
And if you really want to look for it, you can find something to be grateful for in any situation. I'm breathing. I have air in my lungs. It may not be best quality air, but I can still breathe.
No, I'm with you.
Ollie, thank you. I have really enjoyed our conversation.
Likewise, thank you. I had all these things. That's often the way on podcasts. So I feel like there's so many things I could have talked about, and that I've thought about to talk about. I can't think what they are right now. No doubt, when we kind of finish the conversation, I'll think, oh, I didn't talk about that. But either way, it's been a kind of a nice flow, as far as I'm concerned, a nice flow to the conversation. So thank you very much.
Well,
Thanks for having me on.
you're still in the process of your writing, your
Yes.
speaking, getting comfortable with both.
Yes.
But I really wanted to give you the opportunity of sharing a stage, giving you that opportunity for a bit more comfort in that direction, and also exploring your wonderful book that is still percolating.
Thank you so much. Thanks for the encouragement with it.
Thanks, audience, for listening in. We would love to know what you thought of this conversation. What was your biggest takeaway? Do share. We'll put in the show notes for you how you can get hold of Ollie's work, what you can go and see he's been up to so far. And once the book is out, we will go back and change the show notes and probably invite him back to have a chat about it. For now, though, Ollie, thank you so much for sharing your From Page to Stage.
All the best.
Bye for now.